How about a trip abroad using my husband's money, Rebecca? Katie, my brother's wife, said arrogantly. I wonder how it feels to depend on not only your parents' income but also your brother's income to live. Those words made my blood boil. Katie, you're the one living off your husband, aren't you? You're a stay-at-home wife, but you hire a maid and don't even do housework. Enough, both of you, stop it. My dad William stepped in between Katie and me as our argument was about to escalate. He calmly soothed me, then looked up at Katie with a gentle expression. I guess our presence is preventing you from fully enjoying your trip. We should head home. Sorry for the intrusion. My name is Rebecca. I'm almost 40 years old and live with my parents while working as an office worker. 10 years ago, Mom passed away from an illness, and my younger brother Eric, who is 5 years younger, is already married and has left home. I live modestly in a spacious house with just my dad. It's not that I don't earn enough to live on my own. But I continue living at home because I'm worried about him. After losing Mom, perhaps due to the shock, his health frequently deteriorated, and he had to quit his job just before retirement age. Some days he wouldn't eat for days unless told, and once his condition worsened, he'd be bedridden for nearly 2 weeks at a time. There's no way I could leave Dad alone in that state and move out. At the time, Eric was already working as a lawyer and had a fiancée. As my brother and his wife had decided to build a new home near our parents' house, it naturally fell on me to stay with him. Eric is far more capable than I could ever be. I never thought the person my brilliant brother chose to marry would turn out to be so inconsiderate. Katie, Eric's wife, apparently quit her job as soon as she married Eric and became a stay-at-home wife. She leaves all the housework to her hired maid and spends her days having fancy lunches and shopping at brand stores. Eric is so busy with work that he may not have much time to see her, but still, her lavish spending is over the top. Since my parents' house and my brother's are close by, I couldn't help but hear about her carefree lifestyle. What frustrates me even more is her words and actions when she visits our home. How long are you planning to stay here, Rebecca? Aren't you embarrassed to be living with your parents at your age? She frequently mocks me for living at home. I swallow back retorts like I don't want to hear that from you, a stay-at-home wife who doesn't do housework and just goes out to play all day. Instead, I give her a vague smile. Part of me wishes she wouldn't even come over, but Dad is sympathetic toward her. Maybe she's lonely because Eric is so busy. He never turns her away, and in fact often invites her to dinner. I wish Dad and Eric would be a little more understanding of the stress this causes me. But when I see Dad happily having meals with Katie, unfazed by her impertinent attitude, I start to feel like as long as Dad is in good spirits, that's enough. Why did Eric marry a woman like this? I seriously wonder, but there must be some good in Katie that only he can see. I deliberately ignored her rude remarks and continued eating in silence. That day, Dad invited Katie over for dinner again. Eric had been swamped with work lately, and Katie was apparently picking at leftovers the maid had prepared, all alone. Perhaps feeling sorry for her, Dad told me to buy some slightly pricier ingredients so the three of us could have a nice meal together. I wasn't too keen on the idea, but I had no choice since Dad suggested it. I went to the supermarket by the station, bought the ingredients, and somehow managed to whip up party dishes I'd never made before. Even Dad, who had been eating less and less, was delighted by this. "I'm especially hungry today," he said with a laugh. Katie showed up long past the agreed time and plopped down on a chair at the dining table without so much as a proper greeting. In front of her were small plates of the food I had portioned out. "Now that the three of us are here, let's eat," Dad said cheerfully. But her face was gloomy. She poked at the food a little with her fork and let out a big sigh. You think I can eat something that looks so unappetizing? She glanced at the small plates of food and gave me a condescending look. I stared hard at her face, then gazed at Dad in shock. Dad also seemed surprised by her tone and stared at her with his mouth agape. It may not be as good as what the maid makes, but Rebecca cooked this from scratch. Could you please not say things like that? When Dad firmly objected, her face immediately turned sour. It's not like I said I wanted to eat together. I'm helping create memories for William, and you serve me something that looks so gross at first glance. Can't you even consider my feelings at all? What do you mean, creating memories for Dad? Katie swiftly picked up on my mutter. She smirked condescendingly at Dad and me, then said something outrageous. I mean, William doesn't have much longer to live, right? His son's wife is kindly keeping him company, so I should get a nice chunk of the inheritance. Both Dad and I were speechless at this. The air in the living room grew still. Could this really be the wife that brilliant Eric chose? Talking about inheritance before someone has even died is just wrong. Dad still has decades left to live. Before I knew it, I was shouting. Even Katie, who had been poking at the gratin with distaste, stopped when she saw me unleashing my anger. Don't talk about inheritance. Dad may be a stranger to you, but to me, he's precious family. Eric feels the same. He's our only living relative after losing Mom. As I leaned over the table, Dad gently pulled me back. I slowly sat back down, breathing heavily. My anger toward her was still swirling in my chest. Taking deep breaths to calm Dad, I felt my heightened emotions deflating. I'll pretend I didn't hear what you just said, he declared in an unreadable voice. Katie's mockery came flying right back. I'm just stating facts. I don't want the inheritance going to some middle-aged woman who still lives with her parents, dependent on their income. Her words were brazenly clear, and I no longer had the energy to be angry. What Dad tried to purposely forget and forgive, Katie boldly dredged back up, hurling comments that thoroughly looked down on us. This house is old, so I'll give it to you. Good for you, looks like you won't lose your place to live. Her laughter rang out. I wanted to give her a piece of my mind, but seeing Dad silently shaking his head, I swallowed my words. Dad is too lenient with Katie. No matter how busy Eric is with work or how lonely her marriage is, Dad shouldn't be so sympathetic to an adult who can't even tell right from wrong. After quietly observing my expression, Dad said softly, She's the one Eric chose, after all. He laughed sadly. His face looked like that of a father with a difficult daughter, but also like someone utterly exhausted with life. Seeing Dad's face rendered me speechless. I had things I wanted to say to both Dad and Katie, but more than anything, I wanted to know what Eric really thought. Was Eric aware of her behavior? If he knew and let it slide, then as his older sister, I needed to give him a stern talking to. In the end, Katie barely touched the food I made and went home after minimal conversation. Only Dad and I were left in the spacious living room. Creating memories, huh? Maybe so. Dad's back suddenly looked so small as he murmured this. I quietly let out a sigh, careful not to be noticed. 1 month later. At Eric's suggestion, our family decided to take a trip to France. Dad said he wanted to go to France while he could still walk on his own, so Eric and I planned it out. Of course, when I heard Katie was also coming along, I initially asked Eric to take just Dad and go with the 3 of them. If I was there, Katie would definitely make snide remarks at me. I didn't want to ruin the fun vacation atmosphere. But Eric said, it would be great to have someone there who usually keeps an eye on Dad's condition. He overruled me and booked tickets for 4. I reluctantly agreed to go on the France trip, but sure enough, Katie was the picture of sullenness and didn't exchange a single word with me the entire plane ride. After landing at the airport, we headed straight to central Paris to enjoy sightseeing. Dad looked unbelievably energetic, eagerly taking in the sights all around. Even Katie seemed to perk up a bit after having Eric buy her some designer bags. She walked arm in arm with him, but I couldn't help fixating on how his face didn't look very happy. Just then, my eyes unexpectedly met Katie's. She glared at me fiercely, making my heart jump. "Why is Rebecca even tagging along anyway?" Katie smoothly unlinked her arm from Eric's and confronted me. "I asked her to come. In case Dad's health takes a turn, we need someone who can handle it." Eric tried to back me up, but Katie didn't seem to hear him. She looked me over and snorted derisively. "How about this overseas trip funded by my husband's money? The plane tickets were expensive too, so don't get any more ideas about luxury," Katie declared arrogantly. "We're staying in the hotel's suite, but I'm sure Rebecca is fine roughing it outdoors, right?" Eric sharply called out Katie's name, urging her to stop, but she wouldn't quit. "Rebecca, I wonder how it feels to depend on not only your parents' income but also your brother's income to live?" That one line made my blood boil. "Katie, you're the one who, despite being a stay-at-home wife, hires a maid and doesn't even do housework. Enough, both of you stop it." Dad stepped in between Katie and me as our spat threatened to escalate. With a calm expression, he soothed me and looked up at Katie. "I suppose our presence is preventing you from fully enjoying the trip after all. We'll head back then, sorry for imposing. Rebecca, could you check the bus times to the airport?" Without getting angry or flustered, Dad stated this matter-of-factly. As a smile spread across Katie's face, panic flashed across Eric's. "Wait a second. If you two leave, what are we supposed to do from here on out?" Realizing something, Eric hurriedly tried to stop us. But once Dad made up his mind to return, his resolve was firm. He had me look up airport bus times, then promptly set off in the opposite direction toward the bus stop. I had no choice but to glance back at my brother and his wife as I chased after Dad. "We'll manage just fine without that old man and spinster." Katie's voice trailed after us. For a moment I was furious at Dad being called an old man, but I had no time to let Katie get to me. Hearing Eric's anguished voice and Katie hurling insults at him, I ran after Dad walking ahead alone. 2 hours later. As we sat drinking coffee at a cafe near the airport, Eric came rushing in, his face ashen. He was drenched in an abnormal amount of sweat, clearly in a state of distress. Eric practically stumbled over to our table and apologized to us. "I'm sorry about before. I'll apologize properly later, but for now, please help Katie." He bowed deeply, imploring Dad. Dad and I reflexively exchanged glances. "Did something happen to Katie?" When I asked on Dad's behalf, Eric launched into what happened after we left. Apparently, after we got on the airport bus, he and Katie took a taxi to the hotel. The problem started after getting in the taxi. The English that had gotten them by at the tourist spots apparently didn't work with the taxi driver. Neither of them spoke French and couldn't understand what the driver was saying. The driver seemed to be asking them something, but they just answered without fully grasping it. As a result, after Eric paid and got out, the taxi drove off with Katie still inside. "I tried calling Katie but couldn't get through. There's a chance she may have been dropped off somewhere and pickpocketed or something," Eric said, his face turning pale. Not knowing French, Eric probably figured it would be faster to ask us for help rather than chasing after the taxi himself and ending up in the same boat. Dad and I can speak French perfectly. Katie seems to think Dad is just a helpless old man, but he used to be a French teacher. And I'm a current French teacher myself. This France trip was planned by Eric in hopes relive his younger days. That Dad could. In fact, upon arriving in France, Dad seemed to recall his study abroad days and was full of nostalgia and vigor. I also studied in France during college, so after parting ways with my brother and his wife, Dad and I had been leisurely reminiscing about our time abroad. Dad listened to the story with a solemn face, then slowly nodded. Let's head back to the city center. The taxi that picked you up is likely back there waiting for customers. At Dad's word, we quickly got ready and set off to search for Katie, who had been stranded somewhere alone. After returning to the city center, Dad and I split up to look for the taxi that had taken my brother and his wife. Most taxi drivers converse in French without using English as an intermediary. Dad found the taxi that had picked them up before I did. He spoke with the driver in fluent French and swiftly tracked down where Katie had been dropped off. Fortunately, Katie was sitting right where she had been left, without a scratch on her. It was good that she was unharmed, but apparently she had been pickpocketed right after arriving. Her bag and valuables were gone, leaving her broke and empty-handed as she sat there. Seeing Eric's face, Katie's eyes quickly welled up with tears, but then she scowled at us. "Why'd you come along?" Katie sourly questioned Eric, who let out a big sigh. "If they weren't here, you would have been left stranded here indefinitely with no money at all. Show some gratitude." Katie's eyes rounded in confusion. "What do you mean?" "Without them, we can't even travel properly. You and I both not speaking French is why this happened. But they're different. Father and daughter French teachers, probably better than me." Katie uneasily glanced our way. A mischievous thought came to me. "If we hadn't found you, you might have been sleeping on the streets here tonight." And I quietly told her. Katie bit her lip in frustration. "And the cost of this trip was split between me and Eric. How about it? An overseas vacation enjoyed with the money of the spinster living at home?" Katie hung her head even lower, her shoulders trembling. "It's William's money anyway, isn't it?" As Katie retorted, Dad slowly shook his head. "I didn't do anything. Both Rebecca and Eric are doing well on their own strength. They're children I'm proud of." Katie shot me a sharp glare, then clammed up. I had a mountain of things I wanted to say to Katie, who couldn't even manage a word of thanks after being rescued, but Dad whispered, "Let's leave it at that." So I quietly closed my mouth, going easy on her. It must have been quite a humiliating experience for Katie. She probably never imagined being helped by the people she looked down on. Even Eric seemed fed up with Katie stubbornly antagonizing us, his face weary. "Well, now that the issue is settled, shall we properly go sightseeing again? Next, let's visit the restaurant I used to frequent during my study abroad days." At Dad's bright suggestion, the family became one once more. We enjoyed the France trip to the fullest, unfazed by Katie's sulking. After returning to the States, Eric apologized profusely to us and, surprisingly, promptly divorced Katie. Shocked, I asked why he had even married her in the first place. It turned out Katie had pressured Eric into marrying her, claiming she was pregnant and he needed to take responsibility. After getting married, it came to light that the pregnancy was a lie, but he said he had been too concerned about appearances to go through with a divorce. However, this incident made him fed up with her for looking down on Dad and me, solidifying his decision to divorce. Post-divorce, Katie was kicked out of their new home and could no longer continue as a stay-at-home wife. Of course, she also no longer had a maid to do the housework for her. On top of that, being pickpocketed during the France trip cost Katie half her assets. She's probably toiling away at work these days. The France trip seemed to revive Dad's youthful memories. He rapidly became brighter and more energetic. I quit the school I had worked at for years and have been busy renovating our home to open a French language classroom. Eventually, I hope to have Dad teach French at the classroom as an instructor too. Our father-daughter dreams will likely keep expanding from here. I'm Jessica, a 38-year-old office worker. I have been married to my husband, Brandon, for 5 years now. However, we've been struggling to have children. Being the eldest and only son, Brandon has always been under pressure from his mother, Chloe, to have a boy since we got married. These days, few people care about the gender of their children, and either a son or daughter can be an heir. Brandon himself doesn't care about the gender and says there's no rush to have children. But Chloe sees me as an adversary and always tells me when Brandon's not around. A woman who can't have children is useless in this family. If you can't have one, you might as well leave. Her words have hurt me deeply. I'm sorry, Chloe, but honestly, your words are very pressuring. I wish you wouldn't say such things. I finally gathered the courage to express my feeling to Chloe. But she didn't understand it at all and became even more oppressive, telling me not to defy her. I was shocked. I never expected such words from her. At first, I endured it because she's Brandon's mother and I didn't want to cause any trouble. But enduring Chloe's sarcasm while undergoing fertility treatments was mentally taxing, and my health started to decline. Realizing I couldn't hide it anymore, I confided in Brandon. Furious, Brandon sternly warned Chloe, which stopped her surprise visits to our apartment for a while, but she continued to hurl insults daily through WhatsApp. Then one day, I found out I was pregnant at the fertility clinic. The first sight of the fetal ultrasound filled me with indescribable emotions. When I showed Brandon the ultrasound at home, we both cried tears of joy. But our happiness was short-lived as I remembered a significant problem. Chloe. Telling her about the pregnancy would surely lead to her frequent visits, insisting that pregnancy isn't an illness, telling me to move around, or bragging about her own experiences. The doctor advised me not to overexert myself until a heartbeat is confirmed, so I was torn about what to do. After discussing with Brandon, we decided I should stay at my parents' house for a while. If I'm at my parents' house, even if I'm not feeling well, my parents are there, and Chloe won't make a surprise visit to my parents' house. It's close to my workplace and Chloe wouldn't barge in there. I called my mother right away, explaining about the pregnancy in Chloe, and decided to return home for a while. Brandon drove me to my parents' house, where they were overjoyed about my pregnancy. After greeting my parents, Brandon returned to our apartment. Being back at my parents' house, away from Chloe, brought me peace of mind. Soon after, morning sickness hit, and I spent days in bed. At work, my pale face raised concerns, and my boss suggested me to take a break, which I gratefully accepted. Many women at my job, including those who have undergone fertility treatments, understood my situation. Their support was comforting. Other than severe morning sickness, my pregnancy was uneventful, and the baby grew healthily. Feeling the first kicks was indescribably touching, and I lovingly caressed my belly every day. In fact, Brandon and I had already planned to move to a bigger house once we had a child. The reason is, our apartment was getting old, and while it's fine for just the two of us, it felt inconvenient for raising a child. We had set various criteria like proximity to stations, hospitals, and shopping facilities, and were searching accordingly. Then, Brandon suddenly sent me a photo. It was of a new high-rise condominium near the station. The area around the condo had everything needed for living, like commercial facilities and hospitals, and it was close to nurseries and schools, making it convenient for kids in the future. Completion is expected next month, and I casually entered a lottery for it. Surprisingly, we won. If you don't like it, we can just transfer it to someone else. Jessica, you can see it and decide. Hearing this, I immediately opened their website, was taken aback by the stylish design of the rooms, and exclaimed, "What? The latest system kitchen, a bathroom with a sauna. Moreover, the unit we won was on the top floor of the 30-story building. The view from the window was amazing. I was a bit hesitant about the price, but Brandon works at a top-tier company, and with our salaries, we could afford it, so I decided to sign the contract for this condominium. Of course, I couldn't keep the purchase of a new high-rise condominium from my in-laws. I talked about it through Austin, my father-in-law. Austin said, "It's impressive that you young ones bought a condominium. If you need anything, I'm here to help." However, Chloe was not happy about this. When she found out we bought a high-rise condo, she was upset that we weren't living with her. Then, an incident happened. A week after moving in, Chloe suddenly visited. As usual, she went around the room complaining, but I entertained her with a smile. Then, suddenly, Chloe said she dropped her keys near the emergency stairs. What? Why did you drop your keys by the emergency stairs? Don't tell me you climbed all the way up here? I said, but apparently, she had dropped them while checking where the emergency stairs were, just in case. I went to the emergency stairs instead of Chloe to get the keys. At that moment, "I'm taking this house." I was suddenly pushed from behind, lost my balance, and fell down the stairs. Ouch! Help, somebody! Unable to stand due to pain and shock, I suddenly felt warm water flowing around my feet. Realizing I had probably broken my water, I thought about calling an ambulance, but since I had hit my head hard, I lost consciousness. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. Brandon was there, looking worriedly at me. "Jessica, are you okay?" Brandon asked, visibly shaken, as I woke up. "Where am I? What happened to me?" I was still confused from just waking up and had a fuzzy consciousness from the head injury. When I touched my stomach, I felt something was off. My stomach, which was big until recently, had shrunk. Realizing this, I felt the blood drain from my face. "Hey, why is my stomach like this? Where's my baby? Where did my baby go?" I asked Brandon. Then Brandon quietly began to speak. "The baby in your belly is..." The moment I heard those words, I couldn't stop my tears and began crying out loud in the hospital room. Someone on the same floor found me, noticing the emergency staircase door left open. When they went to close it, they found me collapsed and hurriedly called an ambulance. Brandon asked why I approached the emergency stairs, so I explained everything about my interaction with Chloe. I was mentally harassed by Chloe when Brandon wasn't around before, which had once caused me to fall ill. Because of that, Brandon instructed me to always carry a voice recorder. Of course, I started recording the moment Chloe showed up unannounced. After listening to the voice recorder, it was clear that Chloe was the culprit. Brandon was furious to learn that his own mother had done such a thing. Then, a call came in on Brandon's mobile phone from a relative. On the call, Brandon heard a shocking fact. It seemed Chloe, thinking the baby had died, was telling relatives while crying. "Oh, my poor sweet grandchild has gone to heaven. It's so sad. It's because Jessica, even though she's pregnant, went out riding a bicycle." She was making up absurd stories. However, Austin, who was present, had heard nothing like that from either me or Brandon and was looking at Chloe in utter disbelief. It seemed impossible that Austin didn't know anything about it. And the idea of a woman in her 9th month of pregnancy riding a bicycle. That's why the relative called Brandon. It was unbelievable. Then Brandon, taking the voice recorder, said, "Jessica, let me borrow this for a bit. Can you leave the rest to me?" He then left the hospital room. As Brandon left, my parents arrived. After I explained everything, they were both shocked and angry. I decided to trust Brandon and wait in the hospital room for the outcome. Meanwhile, Brandon met with the relative who had called him. It turned out Chloe was gathering relatives at her house, explaining the incident. Of course, her words were nonsense, and she was just trying to make herself look innocent. Some relatives believed Chloe and wept, while others were skeptical and viewed her with suspicion. Suddenly, Brandon burst in, causing Chloe to look at him in surprise. Huh? Brandon, why are you here? You were supposed to be with Jessica. She needs you. It's so sad about the baby. I was looking forward to its birth. Chloe said, even feigning tears. At that moment, something snapped in Brandon. Enough, Mom. I know everything. You pushed Jessica down the emergency stairs, he said, pulling out the voice recorder in front of the relatives. Everyone was shocked to hear the conversation recorded so vividly. Who heard the voice could not hide their surprise. Is this true? Austin, whose face turned pale due to the shock, asked Chloe. No, that's not true. This is nonsense. I didn't go near the emergency stairs. Even after hearing the recording, Chloe insisted she hadn't done it. However, there was a security camera nearby, and its footage would surely show me and Chloe entering the emergency stairwell. When Brandon mentioned this, Chloe, who had been speaking fluently until then, turned pale and began to tremble. How awful! We're family, aren't we? How dare you shame your own mother like this? Chloe clung to Brandon, insisting she was innocent and that it was Jessica who had slipped on her own. Even if that were true, leaving someone who had fallen and not helping them is questionable. However, the relatives who had already heard the voice recording did not believe Chloe's story. Instead, they urged her to go to the police and turn herself in. It's not me. I'm not the bad one. You understand, don't you? You know I'm not the kind of person who would do this. Prove it in front of everyone. Chloe desperately appealed to Austin to affirm her innocence. But no one believed Chloe's story anymore. Soon, the police arrived, and from the audio and the subsequent security camera footage, it was clear that Chloe was the perpetrator. She was taken to the police station and arrested. The reason she did this was because the baby was a girl. Chloe had always been fixated on having a grandson, and when she found out the baby in the womb was a girl, she was disappointed. She thought that by pretending this baby never existed, she could try for a boy next time. When I heard this from the police, my head went blank with shock. Despite all that had happened, the baby grew healthily in an incubator and was discharged after 2 months. A few days after coming home from the hospital, Austin visited our apartment to apologize for the incident. He said that he and Chloe had divorced, that their house was sold, and he was going to move back to his family home. It was sad that the house where Brandon had grown up was gone, but since Austin wasn't to blame, we told him he was always welcome to visit. We regularly let Austin see his granddaughter after that. He adored his first grandchild and played with her with such kindness in his eyes. 3 years later, our second child, a boy, was born. Our daughter, now a big sister, couldn't wait to take care of her brother and was always by his side. Watching them was heartwarming, and every day was filled with happiness. But that happiness was disrupted by a visit from someone. The doorbell rang repeatedly, and when I checked the monitor, to my surprise, it was Chloe. I thought I would never see her again, and seeing her brought back memories of that day, making me feel nauseous. What do you want now? I have no intention of seeing you again. Please leave. I said, but Chloe wouldn't listen. Apparently, Chloe had fallen ill, struggling daily with her health and finding it difficult to go to the hospital without a car. She had divorced Austin, and their house was now just an empty lot. She had no one else to turn to for help. Shockingly, Chloe knew I had given birth to a boy. She had apparently seen us in town, noticing Brandon holding our son. To Chloe, it was the long-desired grandson. She was determined to live with us and make the boy fond of her. So you finally became a proper woman, giving birth to a boy. When you were pregnant with a girl, I was so disappointed in you. But now that you've had a boy, let's forget the past and live together, shall we? For a moment, I doubted my own ears. Live together after all that? Impossible. What are you talking about? After what you did, living together is impossible. Leave now, or I'll call the police. Unfortunately, Brandon was at work at this crucial time. In distress, I immediately called Austin. He was supposed to visit the apartment today to see his son and daughter. With trembling hands, I called Austin. It turned out he was already near the apartment, so he hurried over. When Austin arrived, Chloe exclaimed in surprise. We couldn't argue in the entrance of the apartment building, as it would disturb others. But I had no intention of letting Chloe, whom we had cut ties with, into our apartment again. I gave Chloe an ultimatum, telling her I would call the police if she really didn't leave. Realizing her wish wouldn't be fulfilled, Chloe started to create a scene at the entrance and began arguing with Austin. Troubled, I contacted Brandon at work. After hearing the situation, Brandon called the police, and they soon arrived at our apartment. The police, understanding the situation, took Chloe away in a police car. As the commotion was in a conspicuous place, several residents of the apartment witnessed it. I felt sorry for causing inconvenience to many people. Later, after Brandon returned home, we discussed the situation with Austin and decided to move. As long as we lived here, Chloe would surely come back. We couldn't risk something happening to the children next time. Besides, Austin, though he said he had gone back to his family home, was living alone since his parents had passed away. Our daughter liked Austin and had previously expressed a desire to live with him. Austin is a kind person, and leaving him alone at his age worried us. When we proposed living together, Austin was very happy, despite everything that had happened. Afterwards, we bought a used property in the next town. Though it was second-hand, the house itself was very nice, and the surrounding environment was good too. Living in a high-rise was nice, but raising children in a place surrounded by nature seemed better. Right after moving, my daughter and Austin went to a mountain to hunt for beetles. Seeing them so happy made me feel that deciding to live together and choosing this place was the right decision. Once a month, we invite my parents over, and we all enjoy a home party, leading a happy life. Meanwhile, according to someone I was close with at the high-rise apartment, Chloe, undeterred, visited the high-rise again. But when told we had moved and she couldn't find out where, she left disappointed. If it weren't for what happened, Chloe might have been here, feeling the children's growth with us. Well, it's a natural consequence, but still. Later, I heard Chloe reluctantly returned to her hometown, rented a small apartment, and now lives a lonely life, working part-time in cleaning.